I'm like trying to keep my cool, but frantically running around the house like, where is this thing? Can I find everything in 5 minutes to put in these bags? So that's one thing we would definitely recommend, even if you're planning on doing a home birth.
Welcome back to another episode on the Optimal Body Podcast. I'm DocJen.
I'm Dr. Dom.
And this is little Dante.
Dr. for Boney. Dante Roger for Boney.
Doctor for Boney. And we are going to talk all about our birth journey and story and answer a ton of questions. It's going to be a little longer, but it's all how we got this cute little nugget, perfectly healthy little babe to us.
All right. So super exciting podcast where we're going to share the birth story of when little Dante came into the world, the whole thing, what happened, how we are reflecting back on things, how you felt during a lot of the different stages of what happened. And we have a lot of questions that you got from people on Instagram that you also kind of want to go over.
Most of the questions I think we're going to answer as we go through the full story and everything. Yeah. And then I just picked a select few that we'll kind of hit on really quickly at the end, just a quick Q&A. But yeah, let's start from the beginning. So our intention, which I never shared on social media because I didn't want opinions, feedback. I didn't want anyone's other experience on someone they heard or their own experience or, you know, whatever. And so I had a lot of people reaching out and asking me what I was going to do. And I said, you'll hear about it later.
Yeah. And I think that is great for you, especially, you know, having the platform you do online. People love to share their opinions, and it's not always done with an intention of how it may be received. And I think that's what people need to realize, especially when someone's on the doorstep of having a baby, is being careful about what you share.
Yeah.
And understanding not the intention that you're sharing it with, because often it's shared with the greatest of intentions.
Right.
But based on how the person will receive it, going into this massive monumental thing that is giving birth, especially for the first time, it can really put someone on edge depending on the story that you're going to share.
100%. And I know that especially a woman going into birth, you know, you get to protect your energy. So I think I'm going to start that right now. So if you are going to deliver soon, or you are pregnant, or you have your expectations about your birth or whatever, maybe you listen to this after.
Yeah, because they were going to share some stuff about, you know, the birth plan that we had, and it didn't exactly go to our A plan.
No.
We probably went down to the E plan on the list.
And well, no, not fully. And we'll talk about that. Yeah. But it didn't go according to what you might hear as positive birth stories, right?
Yeah. But there are a lot of positives that you and I are taking from it.
I feel positive about it. I didn't have a traumatic birth.
I think that's amazing.
But at the same time, I want to protect anyone's energy who's listening and about to deliver. So that aside.
Yes. Stepping into just the events kind of as they happened. And again, we'll talk a lot about the specifics as we go through, but you were approaching 42 weeks.
Well, I think
gestation.
Even before that, let's talk about what our plan was from the very beginning. From the very beginning.
Plan was deliver
at
in
a hospital.
And we had an OB and we're going to appointments with this OB, and initially things felt okay. Where they started to kind of not feel as great was you would start asking questions maybe around 16 weeks, 18 weeks, 20 weeks. You're starting to ask questions about the birth itself, and a lot of the answer the OB would give us or the PA would give us, they just kind of kick the can down the road and say, we'll talk about that when we get closer to birth.
Oh, you don't need to worry about that.
You don't need to worry about that right now. We'll talk about it when it gets closer to birth. And a lot of it was, you know, asking about delayed cord clamping stuff, golden hour, positions during birth, like what you'd be able to do in the room if you
when
could
I
move
needed
and
to
walk.
Go and you know,
you'd be able to be in the tub, things like that.
Yeah. And so it wasn't until I think week 32.
Yeah, between 30 and 32, somewhere around there.
That we went to our appointment, and I'll also answer one of the biggest questions that I had been asked as well is what birth course had I been taking coming up to this. And I actually took Mama Stay Fit's childbirth educational course, and great course filled with a ton of information.
They talk through everything.
And not only about birth and different experiences you can have, but what you should do to prep for your body. So I think it was a great...
What your partner can do to prepare for different positions. I watched some of the sections with you.
Yep. So it was great. And with that being said, I had a lot of knowledge now about what would be best for my body. Of course, this depends on how you feel. Like I might end up on my back, and that's going to be the best position that feels best for me in the moment, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I want to say, I want to know that this is being led for me and my experience, not on the OB's experience.
Yeah. And a lot of what they talk about in Mama Stay Fit is the different positions, the biomechanics of the positions, how it can help you through different stages, especially at the delivery stage, and how being on the back, legs open, is not biomechanically the best position. It's one of the worst positions biomechanically for that final delivery. And you just wanted to ask a question about that. Like, if I'm feeling like I want to be in a different position, can I be on all fours? Can I be on my side? And the OB...
She said, oh, no. I need you on your back. I need to be able to see and guide. I mean, you don't want to rip from clitoris to anus, right?
Yeah.
And it was one, like...
I know. There are many ways an OB can answer that question. Many ways they can say, I'm really not comfortable with you being anywhere but on your back. That's what I'm used to, and that's where I feel like I have the most control in...
Or I could best support you.
I can best support you. That would be a very acceptable answer, I feel. Not exactly the answer we would want to hear, but not using the fear-based tactics of, you don't want to rip to clean from freaking mouth to, vagina. And just the way that she answered it really put you off. I was not liking what I heard sitting next to you, because even in asking the question, it seemed like she started to get a little combative, I would say.
Yeah, just defensive about this is how it's going to be.
Because she knew where the question was coming from. Yeah. She knew we were PTs and probably that you would want to do a different thing for biomechanics. And she immediately went a place that we didn't appreciate.
So after that, I started feeling a little uncomfortable and saying, okay, is this the route that I want to go? The book that I read, we can link it below. It's from Inya May, and anyone who knows. I think it was the birth or the something about childbirth.
That makes sense.
That helps.
That makes sense.
Postpartum brain. But it was all about having vaginal births at a midwife center in Tennessee and having just doulas and midwives and doing non-medical vaginal births. And so that's the book that I had already been reading. I had many friends who did this kind of home births. And so that was already something in the back of my mind. My hesitancy to doing that is the hospital that is closest to us based on where we live is my least favorite hospital ever. Yeah. And if you want to hear about that, you can listen to our miscarriage story.
Yeah. We've had a couple bad experiences at that hospital now. And so we just really didn't want that to be the option if we needed to an emergent transfer during a home birth. But then again, after having that experience with the OB, we're like, okay, what are the other options? And you started kind of asking around, and a couple different friends recommended this one midwife, Lisa Marie, who does a lot of home births in the area. And so we got in touch with them.
Yeah. And here's the thing, I tried to call, there's midwives that deliver at the hospital that we were going to go to. And so I tried to call around to the practices that have the midwives associated with that hospital, which is the same online program, the same charting program, the same hospital, everything.
So they would have immediate access to all of your medical records, to all of the prenatal care and everything.
Yes. And the OB that oversees those midwives said that it was too late for me to make a transfer. And I'm thinking, I'm 32 weeks, and if I'm not happy with my OB, I'm not allowed to switch to a different one. It blew my mind.
Yeah, that was a bit interesting right away where, 32 weeks, you're even 5 weeks away from being considered full term. And to me, there would be plenty of time for them to make that switch and get familiar with you and get ready to do a midwife-led birth.
Especially because I've had a very easy pregnancy, essentially.
Non-complicated. There were no major risks. You weren't having any significant pain. Yes. There was nothing that came up on any of the tests we had done. So it's a low-risk pregnancy. Yes. You're not going to take that on. So that was a bit weird. And then that's when we connected with Lisa Marie. Yeah. It was incredible. They came to our house, the next day, a day later after we we contacted them and they're like, great, you sound like our ideal clientele. You're relatively healthy, you're strong, you're very
Low
mobile,
risk, yeah.
you're low risk, everything. And they're like, let's do this.
Yeah. And they went through their whole spiel of what they do and how they practice. And it was just, there was a lot of connecting dots for how Dom and I believe about health and what we do and what they do and believe as well. And even she said, listen, if you go the hospital route, I mean, because first meeting, she wasn't expecting us to just be like, okay, we're in. She said, you can be in whatever position you want. The OB doesn't get to dictate that. You get to say, no matter what you decide and where you want to go, you get to say how you want to be. So I just want to let you know that.
Which, to be honest, is kind of my nightmare. And when I was
and that's
preparing,
what we were preparing for.
When I was preparing to have this birth in the hospital as her main support, being in the room as her husband, I was preparing to work with and potentially have to work against OBs or nurses that were telling you different things that weren't, your wishes or weren't a part of your ideal birth plan. OB comes in the room, all right, on your back, feet in the stirrups, and you're laying on your side, feeling great, ready to deliver. Like, I'm trying to prepare, like, hey, how can I start to form words and say, excuse me, Miss OB, Dr. OB, she's not going to be on her back. We're going to deliver like this. Thank you.
Or I'm going to breathe like this. So I'm going to,
and like, she's not going to bear down and push and heave and hoe. And like all of these things that I'm trying to like arm myself with. And everyone was asking me, oh, wow, you decided to do a home birth? Are you nervous?
Yeah.
Honestly, when we made that decision, I felt a lot more relief because I knew at that point we would have the midwife support personnel, a doula, all in the house, all working to best support Jen, best follow her wishes in the birth plan that we wanted to carry out. And so I felt a ton of relief when we made that decision.
And it was interesting, like we weren't going to have a doula. Dom was going to be the main support if we were going to be in the hospital, because I just figured, well, we have a lot of nurses to help and we have other people. So Dom is my main person anyways. So that was our thought process initially. And then once we got the midwife, they said, for first-time moms, we see much more success when we have doula support as well. So that's our requirement. And we said, okay.
Also, immensely grateful that we went that route.
100%.
Which we'll talk about a little more, because if it had just been me, I may have fatigued out or not gotten to eat or all sorts of things.
Yes, a lot. Okay, so we were going home birth route.
Creeping up on 42 weeks.
A lot of people also ask me mentally, like how you prepared for birth. And I would say that, having the education, taking the courses. I mean, I even did like little webinars that I saw come up for free, or I paid for some webinars, and I paid for a spinning babies class that we did together. Yep. I tried to arm myself with as much information as I felt like I could, so that I would feel as empowered as I could going in. I think education and self-educating so that you can advocate for yourself is absolutely everything. What I did not prepare for, what I felt like no one prepared me for, was weeks 40 to 42 and how mentally fatiguing waiting for this baby that you just want in your freaking hands already.
I'd say even starting before that, because they say full term babies can be born at 37 weeks.
I know.
And that's when you start getting the questions.
Yes.
Like, oh, has it come yet? Or, oh, is there a baby here yet? And to go from 37 weeks to 42 weeks, getting those questions on an increasing basis over that month plus.
That was hard.
Is tough, because then you start to have these things that fly around your mind, like, why isn't the baby coming? Why isn't it here yet? Why haven't I gone into labor? All of this kind of stuff. And so that's another thing to be aware of if there's somebody in your life, like a sibling, a friend, whoever, and they're getting close to their due date. Sometimes it's not always the best to say, is there a baby here yet? Or are we expecting a baby today? Or a great day to have a baby?
Yeah.
Because when that person gets those messages daily over the course of multiple weeks, it can wear on them.
Well, it just increases anxiety. And the one thing you don't want is increased anxiety. Whether that's anticipation and excitement, like it's still building up, and especially getting that asked so many times. So one thing that I had Dom do was text friend groups and family members to say, can you please just, if you're going to field any questions or ask anything, ask me, don't ask Jen.
There's a great way to do it by saying, like, we understand that you guys are so excited and you want to support us the best way you can. And I love the excitement. And if you need to send a message to someone out of excitement or have any questions, send them to me and I can field those. We're just trying to keep these last couple of weeks before baby comes into the world as stress-free as possible. And you'll be the first to know when baby's here.
Exactly.
And so we sent that out to friends and family. And for the most part, people honored that. Some people still have that excitement and want to support you in the way that they feel like they can support, which isn't always the way that you want to be supported.
Right. So I think setting your boundaries, however that looks for you, is super important. And the link that you can send people is haveyouyourybabyet.com.
That's
that
perfect.
Was the best.
That was good. I think you got a few some good laughs out of that. Where
that was my favorite. Someone sent me that, like, you can send this to people, and I'm like, thank you.
What? Don't you click on it and it just says nope?
Yeah, it says nope, and then at the very bottom it says, if you, instead of harassing someone who's about to have a baby or something, like, why don't you spend your time getting them a gift? Or
So coming up to 42 weeks. Also, 42 weeks is the point where
you can't have a home birth.
You can't have a home birth, but also in more traditional settings. My dad has delivered babies his whole career. He's a family practice doctor who delivers babies under an OB, and he was starting to get concerned as we got closer to 42 weeks because that's when the placenta starts to get older. There's a thing called placental insufficiency. Once you go past 41, 42 weeks, the placenta might be getting less nutrients to the baby. The amniotic fluid inside the uterus might start to decrease, so there's less amniotic fluid for the baby to move around with, and also that provides a degree of nutrients and comfort to the baby. So there's all sorts of different things that we wanted to be checking on.
Yeah. And traditionally in my family, which you have to look at your family history and, what happened with your mom, what happened with your grandma, if you have a sister, traditionally first babies were induced in my family, as far as I know, for my sister and for my mom. For my sister, all of her babies were induced, and she never went into what we call spontaneous labor, going into labor on your own, past 41 weeks. So it almost became this, like, does our body know how to do it? kind of thing. And I'm like, no, we can. Like, this is a natural occurrence. And I was determined to have that be that way. However, I knew I didn't want to push things and go past 42 weeks. So we also had a plan to go into the hospital and get induced right at the 42 mark.
At 42 weeks. And
had that needed to be.
Our midwife was talking with us too about, different ways of dating to find what the expected due date could be and how it could be pushed based on the period. But you felt most comfortable, especially based on Flow is the app that you use. You had been tracking your periods. You're like, no, I'm pretty sure that this due date that we were given was the most accurate. So we're going to go with that. So the plan was to go in at 42 weeks and get induced. However, the day before that, you wake up. Well, I guess I wake up and I see you standing hunched over the dresser. Like, babe, what's going on? And you're like, I think I'm in labor, but I don't know.
And this is the reason I don't know. So we had what they call prodromal labor, where it's like more than Braxton Hicks. Like, you're actually having contractions.
Yeah, Braxton Hicks are kind of like random contractions that'll just happen. And those can happen throughout pregnancy at different stages. Prodromal labor tends to happen when you get closer to pregnancy, and it can mimic what real contractions look like. And it can last 4, 5, 6 hours or multiple days and then just stop.
And so I had it one morning for like 2.5 hours, and I was tracking it, and I sent it over to our birth team, and I was like, I don't know. But then the moment I really started to get up and move around and do different things, it stopped. And so that's when I was like, right away when I felt it. So I felt it at like 5 a.m. on Sunday. And I do want to also say, because we talked about like the placental insufficiency, we got some fetal monitoring after 41 weeks. 3 times we went in, or was it 2 times?
We went twice, and the second time she did also what's called a biophysical profile, where she grades the placenta, she grades gross and fine motor movements, and then there's one other thing, there's 4 things that she looks at just to make sure that everything looks normal.
And amniotic fluid. And all that stuff.
And all of that looked fine, which is why we were, again, still feeling comfortable going to 42 weeks, because she's like, your placenta looks great, especially for being at 42 weeks.
It wasn't the oldest.
Plenty of amniotic fluid. Baby's moving just fine. Movement doesn't look abnormal at all. So she's just like, I'm not concerned at all. And on top of that, talking about going past 40 weeks, there's all of these wives' tales about how to induce labor. And you did everything for multiple weeks.
One.
Oh, except the midwife cocktail.
The castor oil.
The castor oil and herbal cocktail, as they call it, the midwife cocktail. But you were eating the dates. You were eating pineapple cores.
I ate so many dates. I never want dates again.
Right.
Especially because when you go to 42 weeks and you have to eat 6 dates a day, that's a lot of friggin' dates.
You're eating 6 dates or 3 of the large dates
Yeah.
every single day. And
That's
we're
a
trying to
lot.
find ways to hide them in smoothies or with peanut butter and chocolate.
Which and smoothies just tasted too sweet to me. Like it was hard.
Peanut butter and chocolate's one of your favorite treats. And so I feel like now you're going to have to go like a year before you go back to that.
I have had one of Sohi's and it was good. So.
Oh, yeah.
But that's what I was almost like, oh, we're going to try all these things just to prove to everyone it doesn't work.
I was giving full body massages to you like every other
We
night.
were intimate.
Yes.
Like daily.
Yes, which they say is one of the best things to thin the cervix and get you ready to go into labor. You went into an acupuncturist twice. Actually, and that was a couple days before you went into labor.
Yeah, so I think she felt good about that.
Yeah. Made her feel good about herself.
And then the day before, we went and visited my dad's gravesite.
Yeah.
And maybe that was something that kind of helped just to...
Broke down a little wall inside. Yeah,
just
that could have...
emotionally broke down and...
Yeah, so... You're going into labor, actually.
Yeah. So Sunday morning hits, 5 a.m. I start having these contractions. I get out of bed right away to start moving around, doing things to see, are they going to last? Or, and how far apart are they?
Because that's when they would stop previously, is when you started moving around and doing stuff.
Yeah.
They would stop. And so you're like, okay, let me move around, see if these continue.
Some people had asked me what contractions really feel like. I mean, I feel like the beginning contractions, I hardly even remember because I only remember what it felt like at the very end.
Yeah.
In the beginning, they're not too bad. It is something that's like, for me, it was low in the abdomen. It kind of wrapped a little bit around the back, but not in the very beginning. Yeah. Kind of was just like this intense contraction, like it's like your body contracting in the front, and then it kind of is like a wave, but it was so easy to breathe through. I could just like put my hands on the bed, sway my hips a little bit, breathe, and I was good. Like I didn't wake up Dom within those 2 hours. He woke up on his own.
I woke up at like 7.
Yeah.
The thing that you said is like, for me, this is how they felt. And I think that's important because you could ask 10 different people about how their contractions felt, and you get 10 different answers about where they felt it, how intense it was, what stage was the worst. It is very individual.
Totally. And I had updated the birth team and, had them on the live stream. There was an app that you can share the live stream and they can see what's really happening. So
essentially every contraction, as soon as it starts, you press a button. And then when it stops, you press a button, and it kind of tracks how long and how long between. And that if you have a birth team, especially if they're going to be meeting you at a birth center or coming to your home, it helps them understand where you might be at in the process.
So then the doula came over in the morning, probably around 9.
Yeah.
And things started to feel like they progressed really quickly.
Yeah. Your contractions were getting a lot closer. They were at least a minute, and they were getting to the point where they were 3 minutes apart, getting a lot more intense.
Yes.
And that's what you tend to see as you approach what's called this transition period.
Yeah. I love our home and how we had it set up. We had our tub. It was blown up
and ready to be filled.
Yeah.
We put a base layer of water in it just so it didn't take so long to fill up when we felt like you were starting to get closer.
And that was in our room. And then I just had like candles set up everywhere. We had lights that we could like have pretty dim.
Diffusers that were
putting off
good scent.
I had a playlist that I had put together as well.
Birth playlist.
And then I had a birth sling as well. I had a birth ball. And then I also have the doula and Dom to kind of provide hip squeezes and different manual points along my back or hips as I needed, or I could dance with Dom and kind of hang on him as I went through a contraction. I could hang on to the birth sling. So we were really supported, I feel like, in the environment that we had.
Yeah. And that's how, again, we're following our A-level birth plan, right? At this point, me and the doula duking it out against these contractions. Like I'd be with Jen through a series of 5 to 10 contractions. And the thing that as a birth partner that was really interesting for me to see is that the techniques that you liked the best and felt helped the most in early labor were not always the ones that were the best or felt like they helped the most in late labor. Like early on, squeezing on the sides of the hips was really helpful. And then especially once you got to the most intense contractions, like that was not as much as what you would want. And so me, or the doula, we just needed to be able to immediately adjust. As soon as you'd be in a contraction, I would start squeezing and you'd be like, no. And I would just start trying to do something different. Because I'm like, okay, I'll press here. And then I'm kind of pressing towards the SI joints, which is something else that you enjoyed. And so, those two things were ones that we would flip between fairly consistently. But also just, that's where I loved that I had watched some of those sections of the Mama Stay Fit. Our midwife had sent a bunch of different videos on different techniques that we could try. And we had a list of like 15 to 20 different things that we could do. And we watched so many things. Yeah, they say try not to stay in one different technique for more than 3 to 4 contractions.
Like labor position.
Because you get diminishing returns. If it feels good through 3 contractions, it's kind of like your body starts to acclimate to it and it's not going to be as effective. So then you want to switch, do something different. Yeah. And also the movement is something that they say can help babies start to descend through the levels of the pelvis. So
yeah, and we were doing a lot like on the birth ball and the birth sling, there was a lot of external rotation, knees wide, sitting on the ball or sitting low in a squat. We were on the toilet and the dilation station, as they call it, because especially if you have like a squatty potty, then your knees are high and wide. And that I really felt like I needed support through. Yeah, we just did so many different positions. Yeah. And things really felt like they started to progress really quickly. And I started to ask, where's the midwife? Where's the midwife?
And even our doula, she has been a part of a lot of births, and she's like, wow, based on how your contractions are progressing, like I bet you're going through transition and baby could be here soon.
Which when she said that, and here's what I will say, I did not let that get in my head because
I was a little bit hesitant when she said that. Yeah. Because again, expectations can be everything. Yeah. And if Jen's sitting there, okay, great, baby's going to be here in 2 hours. We'll get to it, but baby was not there in 2 hours. So if Jen was sitting there expecting, oh, baby's going to be here in 2 hours, and then it keeps going beyond that, then you could feel a little defeated. Like, oh, when is this baby going to come? Exactly. You said 2 hours, 10 hours ago. And I was really glad that didn't seem to get to you.
No, because I had many friends who went 36 plus hours, especially with home birth. And so I knew we could be here a while. And that's okay.
And we're only like 4 or 5 hours in at this point.
When she said transition, I really didn't feel like when she said that, I was like, in my mind, I literally was like, oh, okay, I could do this labor thing. Like, that's not that bad.
Yeah. Oh, if this is transition.
I'm then great. Yeah. And so there was a lot of like, possibly like maybe this could be my birth journey and it's really fast, but maybe not, and I just didn't hold on to those expectations or anything. But we do end up getting in the tub and filling it up all the way because contractions then just got closer and more intense and longer. And we were going almost a minute to 2 minutes apart and had a lot of like pressure. And it really felt like things were
intensifying for sure.
Yes. And then the midwife gets there around
noon, 1 o'clock.
Timelines. No, I think it was later.
Later than that?
I feel like it was 5.
5? Wow. Maybe.
Yeah. Or 4. Timelines are so hard when you go through this all day.
Came that first time. Yeah. And then whenever it was, 1 to 5 p.m., we'll say. And does a cervical check, and she's like, okay, you're like 5 centimeters. Yeah. And we're like, okay, 5 centimeters. Halfway there. And that's the point. That's the point where some people might get very defeated, where they're like, oh, we're already going through transition. I might be 8, 9, close to 10 centimeters already. Right. And then the person says you're 5 centimeters. And it's like, crap. Like, how much longer? And so midwife stuck around for a little bit, but then they said,
but they basically left.
Yeah, we're going to take off. Well, you keep letting us know, if things continue to progress.
And she just said, do some lateral stair walking and do some different things.
What's it called? The mile?
Well, we didn't do that until later.
But wasn't that what she recommended to do?
Later. Yeah. She did. The mile circuit. Circuit. We started doing lateral stair walking, and while I was doing it, like if I was having a contraction, I'd kind of lean forward on the stairs, put one leg up, and then have either the doula or dom squeezing my hips as I rock side to side, which also helps to open up the pelvis. And so we were doing a lot. I was literally doing squats. I was going up and down at a dresser and doing squats, and then would either stand at the dresser and lean over or squat low when I felt a contraction. So we were doing a lot of different things. The contractions did continue to intensify, but I never felt a point where I needed to like bear down and push. I never felt that pushing sensation.
Which is what a lot of women say, like, oh, when it was time to push, like,
You
I just knew.
Yeah.
I couldn't prevent myself from pushing.
Right.
Doula kind of would ask you that, like, have you felt any sensations to push or anything like that? And you're like, no.
Yeah.
And one thing also that was happening is like the contractions would continue to intensify and get closer together and slightly longer, but then they would start to spread out again. And we'd have more of this lull, I want to say, where they're still intense, but there was larger gaps between them.
Yeah. And so at 10:30 at night, I remember saying the midwife had talked about if there could be like a cervical lip or something is stuck and she needs to just do a little manual massage around the cervix, like something just doesn't feel right because they're getting so intense. And by intense at this point, it was like, it wasn't wrapping to my back necessarily. It was like deep into the front of my body, almost where my pubis symphysis is. So it's like low and really in the front of my body. And when that peak of the contraction would hit, it was so intense there. It was almost hard to be in any position when I would feel that intensity of just that front point of the contraction. And so I was like, something doesn't feel right. It's not like, it doesn't feel dispersed. It doesn't feel like it's wrapping it. Like, and I still don't feel the need to push. Like after all we've been through, as close as they've gotten, I don't feel the need to push. So can we ask the midwife to come back? And that's when she said, oh, tell her to do the mile circuit, which if you know what the mile circuit is, you're in like a cat-cow position, and then you come down onto your chest. So you're in like a puppy pose and you hold that for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So you go through contractions there for 30 minutes and then you lay on your side and you have your knee up onto like a stack of pillows and you hold that for 30 minutes and then you do lateral stairs for 30 minutes. I'm sorry, I could not hold those positions for 30 minutes.
Yeah, laying down was also just really tough for you in general, whether it was side lying or lying on your back. Like that was really tough. Contractions seemed to be the most intense in those positions, and every time we would try to get into them, you'd start into a contraction and like squirm yourself out of it.
I literally would flip over onto all fours and be like, that's not happening.
Yeah. And so, yeah, listen to the body. There were other positions that felt better in those moments.
Well, we tried 15 minutes instead of the full 30. We did 15 minutes. I still, had to wiggle myself out of positions. Sometimes it just felt like so uncomfortable. And who knows, maybe if I would have held those positions, things would have been different. But for me and my body, it felt like this is not where I need to be. And so we did that for a while. Still, things weren't changing. We did inversions, things weren't changing. So we tried a lot of different things until finally the midwife came at like 12:31 in the morning.
Just after midnight, between 12 and 1. And again, this is where power of having the doula there as that additional support person was amazing, because throughout that day from 5 a.m. to midnight, like I got to take my half-hour break to go down, have a little something for breakfast to make sure that I had good energy, go have lunch, stand outside and get some fresh air, go have a dinner. When the midwife got back, she just said, hey, let me take over. Both the doula and I laid down for like an hour and a half nap, and then we got back up and got at it.
Well, that was after we broke my water, I think, right?
Then I took the nap.
Yeah. She checked my cervix when she came back. It was between 5 and 6 centimeters.
Yeah.
And this time she
said, the same.
You have a swollen cervix. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that feels like, right? But it made sense to me because the contractions were so intense right on the front of my body. And she said, I feel when I feel around the cervix, I feel like there's a little scar tissue or there's a pull-up or something on. And when she tried to massage into it, it bled. And so she said, well, I don't want to do that.
Because I don't want you to bleed or hemorrhage or something.
Yeah. So what we can do is break your cervix and hopefully that...
Break your water.
Yeah, not the cervix. Break my water and hopefully that would put his head down onto the cervix more, which could help put pressure onto the cervix to open it.
Yeah, because what she was saying, she's like, I can feel his head, but it doesn't feel like it's fully engaged into the cervix. With the breaking of the water, she's like, the water has some buoyancy to it. If she breaks the water, then he might descend that little bit more. And so she ended up breaking the water. The reason she was initially hesitant to do that is because as soon as you break the water, there's the increased risk of infection. So you want to do fewer cervical checks because water's broken and you can get bacteria in there easier and higher risk of infection with that. And after the water's broken, you have about a 24-hour window
before you need
after that before you need to go in
Yeah.
Again, mainly because of risk of infection and also health of baby.
Yeah. And by the way, like for midwife at home, at least according to their protocol, you don't go longer than 2 days before you need to go to the hospital. So she was like, at this point, we have a day left anyway, so we can break it and see what happens. Yeah. And so I was comfortable with that decision. I felt good about it, especially since things weren't progressing and nothing else was changing. I said, okay, let's try. Liquid was clear. Amniotic fluid was good. There was no odor. We were good to continue on. Well, then that's when I think you and the doula took a nap and got away, and I was just with the midwife for a while. Contractions were about 5 minutes apart now again.
Yeah.
And I was just in the tub, and she actually ended up painting my thumbnail because it had fallen.
Thumbnail had come off.
The nail polish had come off. She was like, for pictures since we're here. And I'm like, okay.
Did the nails up?
She made me toast. People were taking care of me. And then all of a sudden they started to progress. And I guess I don't know how long had gone by, but it felt not that long, and it started to go to 4 minutes apart and then 3 minutes apart. And I think that's when you guys woke up, and I was like, things are feeling a little bit more intense. I remember, some support.
Being back in it once things were really getting intense after the water was broken.
And then it started going to 2 minutes apart, and then it was like 1 minute apart. And once it was transitioning to that 1 minute apart, I did feel like I was in transition. My body was literally shaking. Like I uncontrollably like vibrating everywhere, and I couldn't control it. I don't know if it was just that I had been going through this for so long. My body was trying so hard to push this baby down and in, but the contractions were lasting now over a minute. So they were almost 2 minutes, and they were about 1 to 2 minutes apart.
So you're spending longer in the contraction than you have rest between.
Yeah.
And things getting really intense.
But for me mentally as well, yes, it's so intense. And it was again coming to the front of my pelvis. The thing that I say is like, yes, it is so intense and it's hard. And I guess I don't know what it would feel like to go beyond 6 centimeters at this point. But the break that you get in between the contractions tells you, I can do this. I can do this.
And I want to always give you immense credit for how long you went through all of this. And not once did you look at me or the doula or the midwife and say like, I can't do this. I need to go in, or I can't keep going with this, you know? Yeah. Again, I think it's a testament to the preparation you did ahead of time and exactly what you're saying. Like during those breaks between the contractions, like you really knew how to get into your breath. You knew how to get into your own head and just say like, I can keep doing this. Like there's a healthy baby at the end of this journey. And that's what you stayed focused on.
Definitely. Well, with things so close together and literally shaking in my body. And at that point, that's when the midwife told me I was in transition as well.
Yeah.
I still didn't feel the need to push. And I said, something's wrong. You need to check me. And so this is at 5 a.m. And of course, you know, she broke my water at 1:30. We want to try to extend time. Or was it 6 a.m. that she checked again?
Yeah, about 5 or 6 a.m.
Yeah. And I just said, it's not right. I don't know, but it's not right. Like I don't have the urge to push. I don't feel like his head is like I can't reach and feel anything. It's just not right. And so I had her check again, and I'm still between 5 and 6 centimeters. I still have a swollen cervix, and things haven't progressed. So at that point, she said, okay, well, you know, we can keep trying different positions and doing different things. Yeah. And we didn't stay in the tub that whole time either. We got out, we went to the toilet, we did different positions, and then we got back in, and it was still like something's wrong. And so or she said, or we try to go to the hospital and see if an epidural might potentially relax and help the cervix to open.
Yeah, I mean, those were essentially the options where, well, we stay the course and kind of keep doing the same things we've been doing and see if eventually you start to dilate more, or go to the hospital and see if there's other interventions. And the thought was that, hey, potentially an epidural will help that cervix be able to relax a little bit more to dilate that remaining bit,
which I was obviously open to and fine with, but I was also like, but I do feel like I've been so supported from Dom and the doula that I don't feel like I was fighting my contractions. Was it hard? Was it intense? Yes, but they reminded me how to breathe. They were breathing with me. They were helping me to tell me where to relax on my body as I'm going through it. Like I wasn't squeezing. I wasn't contracting my pelvic floor. I was relaxing. I was opening. Like I know I was. So, you know, at that point I said, I don't know what else we could try here. Like it's not working. So I do think we should go to the hospital. At this point, it's not an emergency. We were checking his heart rate. It was good. So we could go to the hospital of my choice. It was a little further, so I'd have to be in the car a little longer, but I would feel better going to a hospital that I wanted to.
Yeah. So we get ready. And another question that you have gotten is, what do you put in the birth bag? Which is kind of like the go bag that you grab when it's go time to go to the hospital.
Which you hopefully have ready before.
Which we definitely should have gotten ready beforehand. So even if you're planning a home birth, make sure the go bag, the hospital bag is all packed up. Because all of a sudden we're like, okay, we're going to the hospital. Get the hospital bag ready.
Which I did have a list.
You had a list, which was very helpful. But I was just looking at the list and I'm like, I don't think all of these are necessary. I'm just running around. I have multiple duffel bags, just like shoving things in these duffel bags, a change of clothes, pillows. Because they said, bring a pillow for yourself. So multiple pillows, baby clothes, snacks, because they say like if you're going to be in the hospital, like they don't have the greatest snacks, so packed in snacks. There actually was Element in there. I forgot about that. When I was unpacking the bags, I found Element in like one of the random pockets, which is electrolyte drink that we love.
Yeah, and we've talked about it all the time.
Multiple times you asked me like, is there Element? Like, and I'm like, no, I didn't get it packed, but I think the midwife threw some in there.
Oh, dang it.
So yes, Element did get packed, but we didn't use it. What else? Different balms like...
I feel like I could pull up the list.
You could pull up the list.
Just so that we could say, what was the most helpful thing that we...
was in the hospital bag. So yeah, I'm like trying to keep my cool, but frantically running around the house like, where is this thing? Can I find everything in 5 minutes to put in these bags? So that's one thing we would definitely recommend, even if you're planning on doing a home birth, just pack the hospital bag.
Yeah. Have your birth plan ready, which we didn't have a birth plan printed out.
But we had talked through it so much that we just kind of
exactly what we wanted.
What our plan was.
Yeah. Toiletries. That's a big one.
That is a big one because I'm also like grabbing her blow dryer and grabbing like other things for her that I am not super familiar with everything that she uses. So
chapstick, that was a big one for me. I love chapstick. We were going to put coconut oil on the baby bum for the meconium when he came out.
Which we did have. I packed
So coconut oil I would say is good if you want makeup or blow dryer. I loved that I had my blow dryer and a little makeup so I could feel like a human the day after. Silverettes or nipple butter, I would say that's a big one. Phone chargers,
computer chargers, computers, depending on, again.
If you need to. Well, you didn't bring computers.
I didn't bring a computer initially, no.
So I was like, we're not going to be working. This is not about...
Yeah, we're not going to be working, but we also didn't expect to be at the hospital multiple days.
Yeah. Breastfeeding pillow, if you need that. Or I would say to do it. Headphones,
heat packs.
Yeah.
Other things like that. And so there are lists. I think, did they have a huge birth bag list in the course?
No, that was from a podcast I listened to.
Okay. Yeah. There's great podcasts out there that just kind of go through tons of things, which is where I think we created that list initially. So then drive to the hospital, relatively uneventful because we drove our new car and you had all the pillows in the back and I had all
the pillows and I was in puppy pose because it kind of helped to take pressure off the cervix a little bit to be in that puppy pose position. So I only had like 5 really bad contractions on the way. Yeah,
on the way to the hospital. Get to the hospital. They're waiting. Were they waiting for us?
Yes, the midwife had called ahead to say the situation and what was happening.
Because they had a wheelchair ready.
Yep.
Got you into the wheelchair. I went and parked the car. Actually, we were going to the emergency entrance, so I just parked in one of the emergency spots. You got in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
But sitting was also really tough for you. So every time a contraction comes along, you're like...
Getting out of
the chair, like, get me up to a room.
I know. And when they like needed to take my ID and everything at like the front where we were for the checking in for the OB to get a room. I forgot
your ID was in your phone.
Yeah, he brought my old ID, which is fine. They were like, this is fine. It's an ID.
It's an ID. We'll get you through.
Yeah. So. But they were like asking other questions. And so at that point I was like, fine, if you're going to just sit here and ask me questions, then I'm going to turn over. And so I got out of the wheelchair and I'm like hands on the wheelchair and bum forward, bum out.
Yeah. And one thing that at that point they're like, oh, we see that you have been seeing this OB, who we'll just leave unnamed.
Yes.
We see you've been seeing this OB. Like, is it okay if we put you on with her since she's on today?
Mm-hmm.
And initially, because you just wanted to get back to the room. You're like, yep, that's fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
Let's go.
At this point, I really just wanted the epidural. Okay. I had gone through all these contractions for over 24 hours.
Yeah, we're like 28 hours in at this point.
And I was like, I am fine doing them if I know for a fact that baby is on the other end of this and I'm, for a purpose. Now at this point, I know I'm in the hospital, so I know I get that epidural. So at this point, my mind's just like, give me that epidural, give me that relief.
Get to the relief.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think something that is really good to start prepping mindset wise for is when you go through your birth plan, you've got plan A, B, C, D, and we're on like somewhere around C right now, getting to the hospital and going in to do the epidural, because B would have been go to the hospital and continue to have medication-free birth, but we're getting to the epidural, so it's like, great. But just know at the end of all of these paths, whether it's A through E, is healthy mom, healthy baby. And that's the goal. And I think that was the mindset that you were going in with, the mindset I was going in with. So as we started working our way down our birth plan, we're like, it's okay. Yeah. It's still bringing us towards healthy baby, healthy mom result.
And at this point, I had heard, I've heard amazing home birth stories. And I've also heard, plans that didn't go according to plan. And I just knew my biggest thing going into birth was I can have no expectations. Like I have to let go of what I think it should be or what I want or whatever. Like I'm not doing a home birth because I'm trying to prove that this whatever. Like I'm not trying to prove an unmedicated birth in some kind of fashion or some kind of way. I just really wanted to feel the most support in my setting, in my providers, and in my body. Like that was my main goal. If I could have that in the hospital, I would have had that in the hospital. And if I needed to transfer, if I needed to go anywhere else, if it needed to look a different way, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So we finally get back to the room. They needed to do some tests because they needed to do blood tests. They needed to do COVID tests prior to getting in for the epidural.
So I'm still on all fours. I'm like on my forearms and my knees as they're like taking my blood.
And taking your blood pressure. And you're like, do I need to move? They're like, nope, it's fine.
Which was still like
blood pressure was still great.
110 over in all fours.
Blood pressure was still even keel.
Yeah.
And so, then we get to the point where they're like, all right, anesthesiologist is coming in, epidural time.
Yeah. And then the best part
of the story, and it doesn't involve Jen. So they're bringing epidural in, and I'm like, great. I got to be here to support Jen because she needs to stay really still. I mean, they essentially are sticking needle into the spinal canal.
And I still am having these like 2-minute contractions.
Yeah, and Jen's still having these intense contractions. So he raises the bed up really high. They had put a chair on the side of the bed for me to sit in, but had I been sitting, my eyes would have like been at your knees.
Yeah.
And so first you start going through a contraction and I reach around. It was just instinct. I'd been up so long and I'd been rubbing her back around her SI, and the anesthesiologist had already sterilized you with like whatever it is, a iodine solution or whatever. And I reach around back and the guy's like, oh, sir, don't, whatever. And he goes and like grabs another iodine because I touched her back where he was going to do the epidural. Yeah. Whoops. So that contraction gets done. He is getting done re-sterilizing you. And then he goes to start the next epidural.
And we go into our breathing again together.
Because you started another contraction as the needle's in. Yep. And I'm like, great. Been doing these all day long. So here's another thing that I want to give you credit for is rarely, if ever, throughout this like day and a half process were you screaming or yelling, because they say like try keeping low pitched hum or guttural type noises. And so all day when you're going through these contractions, I'm trying to, you're doing great, babe. Keep it low. And so you start going through the contraction again. We have our masks on because COVID test still hadn't come back. And I'm humming with you. I'm holding your hands. And all of a sudden it hits me.
Yeah. All of a sudden he starts to sit down and I'm looking at him like, what the hell are you doing? I am still going through this contraction.
I'm going through a contraction. I've got a needle in my back, but something hit me right in my forehead and I start feeling hot. My breath starts to feel a lot more difficult. And I'm not like looking at him stick the needle in you. I'm on the opposite side of you, just humming and breathing with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like, okay, I just need to sit down and act like I'm okay.
Yeah. You were like, it's okay.
I'm like, it's okay.
And I was
babe.
like, what?
It's
not
okay.
okay. Why are you sitting?
And this is where I don't remember anything, but she says all of a sudden I slump to the side.
Oh my gosh. And then all these nurses like come around him and they sit him up and his glasses are like turned to the side on his face.
My glasses are hanging off one ear practically. I start coming to, and there's like 5 nurses in the room.
There's no blood in his face. Like he is
I was just white,
pale.
and I started full body cold sweat.
Yep.
And just like me thinking through, like after the fact, okay, what happened? Like that for sure was like some sort of autonomic flip where my brain was suddenly like, nope, you're not getting enough oxygen. We need you to be horizontal. And there's something called vasovagal syncope, which is a fainting response that our body has as a safety mechanism. If your brain's not getting enough blood, it just forces you to faint. And I think the sweating was a like, hey, we need to get heat out of the body. So I was just fully drenched in this cold sweat. Came to, and all the nurses are like, okay, are you okay? Are you okay? Shift over to this wheelchair.
I mean,
they put me in a wheelchair.
Well, it was even before that. It was like going through my mind. I'm like, did he have a seizure? Did he pass it? Like, what is happening to my husband right now?
They press the panic button in the room, which
That's
is like
why all the nurses came.
Which is like the code button, and all these nurses come running in the room like, is she okay? Is she okay? Thinking that something's going on with you. Nope, it's me passed out in the chair.
I mean, luckily, the chair was there. You didn't fall like to the ground, and as soon as they sat you up, you like were coming to, but it was definitely like a slow process.
And I think by that point, anesthesiologist had finished the epidural because I remember him being on me, rubbing my chest. And like, I don't know if anyone knows, but like rubbing the sternum is like a way to arouse people who have passed out or who are minimally conscious. And so then I come to, and they transfer me over to a wheelchair. They're not getting further than 6 inches away from me.
Yeah.
Wheel me to the chair in the bed or bedside chair that they have in the room that they had made out into a bed. They're like, do you want to lay down? Do you want to? And I just shift over to the bed and I'm looking at Jen. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, she's like, it's okay. And at this point, I think you're already starting to feel
epidural hit.
Much better because epidural hits really quick. And nurse runs in, gives me a turkey sandwich, a Gatorade, applesauce. She's like, here, drink this Gatorade. Like, make sure you eat all this. And then again, she's sitting on the chair like 2 inches from me. Like, I'm just going to sit here for a little while if that's okay. So they had a nurse for Jen. They had a nurse for me.
It was so funny. And they're like, the nurse that we had also had a student. So she's like watching all of this. I can only imagine. Like I'm coming in like totally disgruntled and on all fours, like take my blood pressure in this position. And then Dom passes out. They were like, wow, you guys are an eventful couple.
This is a very eventful room. Like, this has been fun so far.
Well, and then also, after that, as soon as I got the epidural and I laid to the side, baby's heart rate gives a tank.
Baby's heart rate drops, which is always a little bit concerning.
Yep. And they needed to give me something else so that his heart rate would come back up. And that was something I would say I did not know. I had not learned. Wasn't
as prepared for that.
Yeah. And they said, oh, this is common. Or this can be common that once mom has an epidural, it relaxes or it does, it has an effect on the baby as well. And I honestly had no idea. I hadn't heard that. And so I got concerned, obviously, when his heart rate went down, but then they got it back up really quickly. And then that's when we start going through the rest.
Yeah. I mean, so after this, it's pretty shortly after this that the nurse comes in the room and we had kind of voiced birth plan to her, like, hey, even the point that we're at, we'd still love to see how this process carries out before we go to any higher interventions. And so she comes into us and says, Dr. OB, Mrs. Dr. OB, who was the previous person that we had been seeing that we left for the reasons of her being kind of controlling and not as open to alternate plans. The nurse comes in, and nurses at this hospital were amazing through the whole process. And she says, hey, I just want to prep you, but I just got a call from the OB, and she just said, yep, she's familiar with your case because you had been seeing her. She knows you're at 42 weeks. She knows you've been in labor for this long and are still at 5 centimeters. And she just said that let's start prepping for a C-section. because this is going to be a C-section.
Yeah.
And again,
well, what was annoying is that she hadn't even come to talk to us.
Hadn't even come in the room
yet. She
yet.
hadn't even seen, okay, this is what it says on paper, but what is happening? What does she look like? What is, she hadn't even come to talk to us. And that's what I think I was most offended by. But it was just that, oh, you're going to go just based on what you see on paper rather than actually coming. And granted, that might be, the case, but still come and talk to us, see what we wanted, see what was going on, see what was happening. Just come talk to us before you relay this message. And we're hearing it from a nurse. And so at that point I said, well, who's the on-call doctor? Yeah.
Who's the other doctor available? Because I know there's more than one OB.
Yeah.
And she says, we can get him in here.
Yeah.
And my one message just in these experiences to both providers, but also if you're going through this as the person in labor or the partner, for the providers, like, I don't care how long you've practiced. I don't care how well you know the patterns. I don't care how well you know the research and everything. Like, again, you can have the idea of what you think is best in your mind, but still understand that there are people going through this. There are mothers going through this for the first time, partners who are trying to support their partner going through this for the first time. And to just come into a room or call ahead and say like, hey, just let them know it's going to be a C-section. Like, how inhumane is the best word, because I was going to say that just the lack of the humanity that is there to be compassionate and be empathetic in the room with the person, hear their birth plan, and then still deliver what you think could be best in this situation.
Based on education and based on educating the
and allowing
people.
them to ask the questions. And as the provider, not taking that personally.
No.
People asking questions is them wanting to gather more information to understand why you might think a certain way. It's not an attack on you. It's not an attack on your education. Get over yourself.
Oh, jeez. We're going there.
Yes. Like, get over yourself and your education and understand you still work with people.
Yeah. And I think that's something that PTs have had to learn, like that we do get asked a lot of questions because we're with the patient from the start of the pain to the end. And, we usually are with them for quite longer. And so you are fielding questions all the time. Well, why is this exercise going to be good? What is this doing? That's not an attack on your expertise. That's how I need to understand so that I feel empowered to actually be able to do this.
It's actually an opportunity for you to better help them understand why you're the expert in the field. So like, don't get short with people. Don't get defensive.
Yeah.
Just field their questions and be human.
Yeah.
And that's what we did not feel at all, which is why it was like, okay, who else is on? And for the people going through the situation, advocate for yourself. We've said it a few times already, but you need to advocate for yourself if you start feeling like you're working with a provider like that.
And that is why it is totally okay if you have a nurse that you don't feel comfortable with, if you have an OB you don't feel comfortable with, like, it is okay to say who else is available.
Is there anyone else I can work with? I don't feel like I'm being best served right now.
Yes.
I don't feel comfortable.
And I would say this is why, we're going to go through the entire thing, but this is why I don't say that I had a traumatic birth experience, is because I feel well educated and I felt that we advocated for what we wanted throughout the entire experience. Was it what we wanted? Like, ideally, no, but were we still able to feel empowered and educated throughout the entire experience? Yes. So this other OB that came in, he was amazing. And he came in and immediately talked to us and said, here's the situation. Here's what's going on. Here's what we're seeing. Let's keep monitoring. I know this is what you want. I know this is the idea is to...
Here are some of my concerns.
Yeah.
Like he said, he laid it all out there.
He educated the entire way.
Yeah.
And allowed time to pass. And the main thing that we were watching is that after we got baby's heart rate back up, there was some time that had passed and his heart rate after a contraction, which is called delayed decelerations, it would kind of drop. It wasn't coming to a concerning point of heart rate contraction, but it was enough where it was dropping below his norm.
They were still calling them delayed decelerations. And the reason those can be concerning is because if the heart rate drops,
he's in distress.
In utero, it's his way of letting us know I'm in some distress. Also, it can mean or correlate with placental insufficiency, meaning he wouldn't be getting enough oxygen from the placental blood. And if that continues to happen long enough, they get worried about anoxic injuries, which means the baby wasn't getting oxygen for long enough.
Yeah.
So again, like something to keep monitoring. But again, the doctor that we were seeing at that point came in. He's like, hey, here's what we're seeing. We need to keep monitoring. The next step that we could have considered was using something like Pitocin, which would increase
the strength of
the contraction, because they were also considering like, okay, maybe the contractions aren't strong enough, and that's why it's not pushing the baby through the cervix or whatever's happening in there.
So that was the option. However, they couldn't take that option unless he wasn't having any delayed decelerations for at least 30 minutes. So there needed to be a 30-minute clean slate of no decelerations.
Yeah, because the Pitocin would just make the contraction stronger and put more stress on him.
Yes, which that was not happening. Unfortunately, he continued to have these delayed decelerations. At first, they were pretty far apart, but then they started to get a little bit closer, and then they started to get to a point where they were happening a little bit longer. I think he had one, didn't he say it was like 5 minutes?
Yeah, one that lasted 4 to 5 minutes. And again, if he's having placental insufficiency and not getting oxygen or not getting enough oxygen for 4 to 5 minutes, like that's where it starts to get concerning.
Yeah.
And they still weren't to the point where they were having every single contraction. There'd be a stretch where he'd have 10 minutes without one, but then he'd have 2 or 3 over the course of, 5 or 6 contractions.
And the nurses, again, were amazing. She asked, like, do you want to have the fetal monitor where you can hear the heart rate? Because then I could hear when it dropped every single time. Or do you want it off? And I actually asked for it off because I didn't want that anxiety to be created or anything. And so she had it off. She was just monitoring it. And they would come in and just rotate me one way, rotate me the other, lift the bed, lower the bed. Like they were trying a lot of different things as well to try to say, if different positions would help him feel a little bit better through the contractions. And 3 hours go by that I'm on the epidural. He checks me again in my cervix and I'm still between 5 and 6 centimeters.
Yeah. So still no dilation. And now we're from whenever the midwife checked the first time, like we said, between 1 and 5 p.m. and whenever this is, which is probably around noon.
Yeah.
We're at 18 hours where you've been at 5 centimeters without progression. The nurse also said she felt that scar tissue or polyp or whatever that was as well and was unsure exactly what that was. We talked with the OB about manual release techniques or different things that he might be able to try. And he said, There's nothing that he could do or nothing that he knew how to do at that point.
So the biggest concern was obviously we want baby healthy. Like that is the thing. And if he is telling us he's in distress, and here's the other thing the OB talked to us about, like even if you were dilating, even if we could come to the point where you are then able to push the baby vaginally, we don't know if his heart rate would continue to drop. We don't know if he could handle like even the pushing,
Because based on how long you'd been at 5 centimeters, like even if he came in and checked and said, oh, you're at 7, like dilation from 7 to 10 could still take a few hours or more, depending on how slowly it went.
And pushing for a first-time mom can
still take some time.
Hours.
And that would be a lot more stress on baby.
Yeah. So
we're at a point here where he said we could wait longer. He said, I'm starting to have some concerns, based on what we're seeing with the decelerations.
Yeah. And that's when we said, same. Like, I don't feel comfortable anymore. We just want baby out at this point.
Kind of been consulting with my dad, like I said, who has delivered babies his whole life. And he was kind of the family member of mine I was keeping in the loop the most, again, mostly to consult with and see what he thought. And he kind of agreed with a lot of what they were saying. And he's gave me more information on the delayed decelerations. And he's like, what is the heart rate dropping to? And it was kind of dropping to 90 at the lowest. And he's like, okay, if it starts dropping to 60 or 70,
that's
much more
really
concerning.
Yeah.
It's happening every time versus every 4th or 5th contraction, like very different. And so it was great to be able to kind of give my dad a call and ask him.
That's when we just decided, and it wasn't an emergency. They had another C-section that was happening at that time. So they were just going to wait until the OR was open and then we would be able to go in and get the baby out. And that was the plan. And so at that point they turned off the contractions, which I didn't even know there was a drug possible to end contractions.
Yeah.
And so that his heart rate wouldn't continue to decelerate. And that felt like I was on a million cups of coffee and my body was literally shaking. So that was crazy.
Yeah. And so at this point, it was pretty quick to the point where we were holding our little baby.
I know. Really crazy.
They roll you in. And like you said, you're on this medication that made you feel like you had just taken
so weird
1 million grams of caffeine and you're literally shaking. When she says shaking, you're not exaggerating because I got to go into the operating room and sit by your head and you're like on the table, just
I'm like, guys, is this normal?
Jittering a little bit. And they start the procedure. Oh, and one thing that I do want to say is the OB that we had been working with, who we really liked, he said, okay, there's nobody else in the hospital who can like assist me in the surgery. So I would need to have the other OB that we had passed on multiple times now assist me. Would you just want her to take the lead anyway? And you're just like, nope, I would prefer you to, you know, lead the surgery. He's like, great, but you're okay with her assisting me? And you're like, yep, that's fine. And so we go in, they start the process. And again, here's another place where I loved the hospital staff, the nurses, the anesthesiologists, because they took your phone and during the whole thing are like snapping photos for you. And the point where the baby was about to come out, where Dante's about to come out, the anesthesiologist is just like, phone. And someone passes him the phone and he takes a video as they're, you know, taking him out shots. And a ton of photos. And it was just incredible. And from the time they started the procedure to the time we heard Dante cry was like 5 minutes.
Oh my God, it felt so fast. It was so weird. Fast. And I know that some people say, you know, if you look into the light, sometimes don't do that because you can see the process of the whole surgery happening. I couldn't see anything. I think they had the sheet too high, so I couldn't see anything. Some people do opt for like the see-through sheet so that you do see the whole process. I was fine not. I was also fine Dom not seeing it because we didn't know if we were going to lose him again.
I didn't faint when I was in the operating room.
And my question going into the C-section was, do you guys do skin to skin within the OR? And they did say they do skin to skin. So
the
that
delayed
was
cord clamping.
They do
was
the delayed
thing.
Cord clamping. They asked how long we wanted to delay it. Because the other thing with C-section now with delaying the cord clamping is that you're wide open and it just delays also how quickly you're going to get
and you being exposed to the air and atmosphere and stuff. So
we requested, they said, is a minute okay? We said, could we go a minute and a half? And they said, yes, that's fine. Just realize like it's more time for her.
And there was also a thing where like we had this kit where we were trying to collect some cord blood and tissue samples. So they said the more that we delay, there's a chance we might not get enough of the cord blood. We're like, that's fine. We want him to get as much of it as possible. And then we can try to collect what we can. So they did that, showed the babe kind of over the drape. And then they need to take him to do, you know, things because especially with the C-section, he's not getting squeezed through the canal. So just to make sure that he's breathing fine, they get all the fluid out of his airways and stuff.
Which felt way too long for me, I must say. I'm like, give me my baby.
I know, they call me over to like,
and I'm like, this is not fair.
And cut the cord and everything.
Dom gets to see him first.
Probably the couple minutes that we're over there, I asked like 5 or 6 times. I'm like, can we get him back to mom to do skin to skin? Can we get him back to Jen? Like, yeah, we're almost ready. And then finally they brought him back and did the skin to skin with you. And
which was great. It's obviously not the same as having a vaginal birth because you don't just get to stay there the whole time. They then have to finish closing me up. And so how long do you think we got skin to skin for?
3 minutes, 4 minutes.
I mean, they did some pictures. The other thing that was hard is that I had to have the mask on. So he, and obviously there's a drape on me. So he's literally on like my high chest neck area and I can hold him. So I had my hands on him, but looking down to my chest where I'm flat and I have a mask on, the mask is like going into my eyes. I'm trying to see, you know, so that not my ideal, but did I get my skin to skin? I still got, and then I got plenty of time obviously afterwards. And so afterwards, well, that's when it was funny. They were like, okay, we're taking Dante back.
And the nurse says like, yep, Dad, come on with me and we'll go back to the room. And I looked at Jen, I looked at the baby, I'm like, do you want me to stay with you? And she's like, yeah, stay with me. And I think it was mostly because you were jealous.
I was jealous, 100%. I'm like, he's going with the baby?
No. So I ended up still going with the baby because we also wanted to do the vaginal seeding.
Oh, yes. We didn't talk about that.
Yeah, which is, you know, when a baby's born C-section, they don't go through the vaginal canal and
get the microbiome.
Yeah, there's lots of kind of stuff. Whatever research saying they get great microbiome seeding from passing through the vaginal canal. So what we did previous to that was we like kind of swabbed with
the nurse
a gauze essentially, swabbed Jen's vagina. And then when we got back to the room, I just took that swab and rubbed it all over Dante's face, kind of in his mouth and all that to kind of try and do some seeding of that microbiome.
Yes. And that was something that we did have to ask for. The nurse knew what we were talking about, which was nice, but it's not something that they ask. They don't that's something that we were reminded by from our midwife to ask if that's a process and that we could do that. And the nurse luckily knew what we were talking about and was able to make that happen. Yeah. So I felt like, yes, the moment that we said, okay, this is going to be the process, I did have a moment of like, I need to grieve that this isn't
when we decided the C-section.
Yeah. I want a moment of like, okay, I want to cry for a second and say this wasn't the process that I ideally had hoped for and the way that I was thinking of meeting my baby. But at the same time, this is what's going to bring him to me healthy. I'm going to be healthy. We're all good. And so it's okay. And I just wanted that moment of like, I grieved this process and then I let it go. Again,
I think that this is where I want to give you another like testament to the strength and the open-mindedness you went into this whole birthing process with, is that was the one moment that I saw you like process a little bit of the sadness and obviously not what my ideal situation was. But since then, like once you have that healthy baby in your arms, I think that's been the focus.
I know.
Like that whole process got him here to us. That whole process got him here to us. Healthy mom, healthy baby was the result we were looking for. And there have still been some things that you need to process here and there, but I think having that open mind and having all of the steps on our birthing plan and having an open mind to, hey, whatever gets him there happy and healthy is what's going to happen.
And being able to advocate, having an OB that we ended up really liking, having the nurses that really support us throughout, having the anesthesiologists really supporting us, that whole process. And this is where I'll say, if you are in the Orange County area, we were at Saddleback and had an incredible experience. And I'm very grateful that we got to go to Saddleback Memorial Care. So I will shout them out.
And just to come full circle on the whole Mrs. Dr. OB, that the one that we weren't the hugest fans of. So we're in the operating room, I think doing the skin to skin at this point, actually.
Yeah.
Baby's literally laying on your chest. We're first time parents, both just crying. And we hear on the other side of the drape, both OBs are closing you up and literally 2 feet away from us. And we hear this OB who, again, we have turned away from twice now, say something to the OB that we liked to the extent of, well, I told him this was going to end up being a C-section.
It was an I told you so story.
It was like a big fat I told you so in the operating room as they're closing you up.
And we're right there, can hear everything.
Yeah. So I refer to my previous statement, get the F over yourself.
Yeah.
Is it really the most important thing for you to tell your colleague, well, I told him so?
Yeah.
In the middle of the operation, just so petty, so insecure.
He didn't respond to that either.
Yeah, he didn't say anything back to it. It's just like, it shows such a level of insecurity to me that you feel the need to say that when you're closing up someone in the operating room, when they're clearly in earshot of you. Yeah, that was another just like, okay, we really made the right choice not allowing you to direct the care.
And that's where I know that the line healthy mom, healthy baby can trigger some people because they're that. Yes, and that can come with a lot of traumatic birth.
Totally.
And I hear that. I've had friends experience it. And this is where I say I am so grateful that we spoke up the way that we did. We did not tolerate her and we went with a different OB. And if we had a nurse that we didn't feel comfortable with, we would have asked for a different nurse. And along the entire process, or, when I felt like things were going off, I told the doula, contact the midwife and she needs to be here. Something's going wrong, and so being able to use my voice and use my intuition and say, this isn't right, or I'm not happy with how that was handled. What else can we do? Yeah. That's where I would say it was not a traumatic birth for me. And I'm so grateful for the education that I had and for the self-advocacy and for the support. I wouldn't also be able to do that had I not had support to back me up, obviously, in those situations as well.
Absolutely. And even, my dad, I've referred to him a few times now, but coming up to 42 weeks where he was getting a bit nervous, just in his experience through his career, as what he's seen, the main thing that he told me, he's just like, end of the day, I really want Jen to listen to her intuition.
Yeah.
And listen to what her body's telling her, because through my years of experience, nobody can feel and understand the mom's or the woman's body the way that they do. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciated that he said that to me, regardless of how he felt. He's just like, tell Jen to listen to her intuition. And when she feels like something's not right, act on it. Mm-hmm. And that's our message to you. If you, as the pregnant person feel like something's not right, act on it.
Exactly. And here's a little reminder too, that amniotic fluid fills a lot of the space. So I had people saying, oh, don't worry, I had a 10-pound baby too. And like, I went late and da da da. He came out 7 pounds, 8 ounces.
Yeah.
So he was not a large baby by any means. It might have looked that way because I'm 5'2", but be mindful of what you say to people.
Yeah.
Remember that there's not just a baby in there. There's amniotic fluid and a lot of other stuff going on.
I'm so shocked with how many people still just say like, you look like you're about to pop, or, oh my gosh.
Are there twins in there?
Yeah, he must be ready to come any day now. Like,
yeah.
Isn't that in the book of what you don't say to pregnant people?
Yes, exactly. I mean, we should know this, but I just wanted to like reiterate that.
Yeah.
Be careful what you say to people.
Great. Should we go through a few questions that we didn't answer?
Yeah, let's do a few questions.
All right, we're going to kind of rapid fire questions that people asked.
Okay. So let's see. Tasha said, how are you feeling as a first-time mom? Any advice for first-time moms or people thinking of having kids? I am feeling over the moon. And this is something that I do want to say, postpartum depression and emotions. There's obviously emotions that I've have been experiencing.
Lots of hormonal changes.
And I would say the biggest emotion that I'm experiencing is the fact that my dad is not here. He passed away in December. I'm going to get emotional. So that's been the hardest thing. Is like I was anticipating at least having him around to be able to hold the baby before he left us.
Yeah.
So that's been the hardest thing, clearly. But I think also having gone through the miscarriage and wanting, to hold my baby so bad. I am in all the experiences. I am up as often as he needs me to be up and feeding him and doing all the things and getting no sleep and so excited about all of it because I've been anticipating and wanting it for so long. So for me, it just emotions look a little different.
And I would say it's all of the things that parents tell you that you just don't know how to expect. You don't know the love that you're going to feel, and you don't know how it's going to change life as you know it.
Yeah.
And so it's all a bunch of unknowns.
Yeah.
And you kind of process through the unknowns and how it changes social schedule and how it changes your relationship with your partner, how it changes work. Just a lot to work through and process through and communicate. Communicate as the partner is caring for the baby. And so, lots of changes when a little one comes into your life.
Yeah. And, I don't know how you can ever prepare yourself for it fully.
Yeah.
I think read the books, do the education as much as you can, and communicate and find your support system as well. Yeah. Who's going to support you through it? If you knew then before labor what you know now, what would you do different? This is an interesting question to me. I don't know that I would do anything different. And here's where I also would say that I got the experience that I wanted. I got to labor at home for over 24 hours with Dom, my doula, and midwife, the way that I saw it, the way that I anticipated, and got to experience that out of a hospital. Like I had majority of my labor experience in the environment that I wanted to be in. Yeah. And so I am so grateful for that. I don't know what I would do different because I don't know why the cervix wasn't fully opening.
I think that one thing, like if we're going to go into a future pregnancy and stuff, and something that people have talked about is, again, on your cervix, we talked about like, was there scar tissue? Was there a polyp? And what we've heard from some other people or other podcasts or people who've had the experience is if you've had any trauma around your cervix, or if you've had procedures, if you've gone through a miscarriage and had a DNC, if you've had an HPV check, whatever that's called.
Yeah, that was a LEAP procedure.
Yes. So anything that could cause that type of trauma on the cervix, it could be something that you want to get checked out and see if there's anything that you can do to prevent that from being an issue that would prevent the cervix from fully opening.
And I think what's hard with that too is like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to go in and try to remove scar tissue. Does that put more scar tissue on it? Does that, you never know the process, but I think it's something to bring up, especially no matter what kind of birth experience you want, like asking an OB if they know anything about this, asking a midwife if they know anything about this. I think it's just a good question to be asked, because in another birth story that we heard, they were able to clear the scar tissue during the process, and then all of a sudden her cervix opened up.
She dilates to 10.
Yep, and then she had the baby vaginally. And again, our experience was very different. Baby's heart rate was dropping, right? So would we have been able to have that experience despite it? probably not at that point. Just something interesting, something that we're going to continue to look into. Yeah. And I am actually going to go to an OB where we look at that scar tissue or that polyp and see what that is. How are you handling business and motherhood? Did you hire help? Let's talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were super lucky in the fact that we do have a team that works with us, and coming up to the birth, we prepared immensely and we batched out podcasts. I mean, this is the first podcast that we're doing in months.
Yeah.
So we batched out podcasts, we batched out interviews, we got content ready. We kind of had our posting and just plan in place so that the first 6+ weeks after Dante was born, we would be able to take a little step back and do a little bit less. But again, we're already starting to experiment with what it looks like stepping back into meetings with our team, doing work, getting back to emails or recording content, stuff like that. My mom's here right now, my mom and her boyfriend. And so they're watching after the babe while we do this podcast. So it's going to be different, and we're just going to need to figure out the flow.
We're only a month in at this point when we're recording this right
he's
now.
A month old.
So we have a lot more to figure out, but we do have my mom now who lives 3 minutes away from us.
Yeah. She's going to be a massive help.
She is available. I mean, aside from her golf, her lunches, her Pilates and yoga and spin and walking, and
she takes care of your sister's kids a little bit here and there, and so it's like
she's a busy woman, but
she's a busy bee.
But we do have, that's the hired help right now that we anticipate having. Will we need other? We don't know right now. We are just going to try to set up our schedule in a way that we could best do. I mean, I don't know. And I think this is what I have felt lately, is that having one baby right now that I get to focus on feels like I can do both. I can at least touch into my business and still be able to take care of my babe. Not everyone feels that way, you know? Not everyone thrives off a little sleep.
Yeah, and I feel just so fortunate that we both work from home anyway.
Yeah.
So we're both here, and not one of us is being pressured or, needs to go back to work in person somewhere and be gone all day. And I just can't imagine what that would look like right now, because that's not our reality. So we also don't have to deal with that or worry about that. And like I said, we have a team behind us that is incredible and so supportive and so responsive to what we need to do. So it's allowed us to kind of have the flexible schedule that we need right now.
So it looks different. We don't know if we're going to hire help eventually. I am also very fortunate that in my family, we've been able to thrive off little sleep. So I feel like I would say 1 month in, it's actually hitting me a little bit.
You're getting up to that wall of
like, okay, 4 to 5 hours feels a lot. Surviving.
Thriving versus surviving.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. What did your doctors tell you for rehab? This is an interesting question that I wanted to go over because doctors don't.
Yeah, they don't say a lot. He just said 6 to 8 weeks and then you can get back to movement after the C-section.
Yes. And he did say, like, for the C-section, for the first 2 weeks, don't do a sit-up. Don't sit yourself up and use your abs.
Yeah.
That was a different OB that was
rotating.
Doing rounds when we saw him. There wasn't any rehab protocol. They do give you this whole booklet that is super helpful actually, and gives you a lot of guidelines of like, oh, if you had a C-section, here's what you should do. If you had vaginal birth, here's how you can take care of yourself. So there is like how to take care of your scar, how to take care of your body, but you ultimately do need to get signed off from a OB that says your scar looks okay enough that you could get back to movement. Now, just looking at a scar doesn't tell you if you can get back to movement, right? So that's where I would say going to see a pelvic floor physical therapist would be the most ideal, because even if you had a C-section, especially if you labored like I did, you still could have some things. Or even if you didn't labor, you went through pregnancy where you're putting a lot of pressure down into the pelvic floor area. So I would say seeing a pelvic floor physical therapist, it is normal to get separation of the abs and get diastasis recti. That happens. That's normal during pregnancy. So getting that addressed and properly rehab with a physical therapist is also very important. So I think your OB is not going to be the person who's really going to help guide your rehab process. A physical therapist would. Yeah. Do you plan to attempt a VBAC if you have a baby number 2?
I mean, because we've talked about this, I guess I could answer the beginning, but that would be the intention. And like we said, we'd need to do some exploration and see people about
Scar tissue.
Looking at scar tissue or
Yeah.
what might be happening with the cervix. But yeah, that would absolutely be your intention and our intention. And what would that look like? Would it be a home birth versus being with a midwife at a hospital versus
an OB?
Like uncertain at this point.
Yeah.
And once we start talking more about a potential baby number 2, then that's when we would explore those things. But
yeah, exactly.
I'm just glad that baby number 2 is still on the table and it's not like, hey, we're a month into baby number 1 and this is it.
No, I think we both have always wanted more than one child. So
yeah, like 4.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Not
Next
like
question.
Most handy, helpful thing you brought in the hospital bag. I think we answered this.
Yeah.
Toiletries, phone charger, and headphones.
Oh, I would agree.
I think those were the best. And bringing a hairdryer so I can actually feel like a human after, and a little bit of makeup. That was great.
Yeah.
Any must-haves for the hospital that you were surprised with or didn't have and wish you did? Okay, so we were surprised that we had the C-section.
Yeah, I was going to say, going to the hospital, like, it could be good to pack a bag anticipating being there for 3 days.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have family or friends in the area that would be able to just
show up
and bring you stuff. Like, luckily, your mom lives 3 minutes from our house and was able to grab some stuff and bring it to the hospital a couple times for us.
Yeah.
But again, being prepared in your hospital bag for any of your A through E birth plans could be good, because then you won't find yourself at the hospital having then gone through a C-section being like, okay, we might need to stay here 2 to 4 days. And we packed expecting to leave the same day. So it could be good to be prepared in case you need to do an overnight or 2.
Definitely. Being an incredibly active person, did you have trouble dilating and pelvic floor relaxing? Again, I will say I don't think it was me fighting it or my pelvic floor activating that caused the trouble in dilation.
I think if anything, based on me knowing how well you know your body, I think you have a very good body awareness, and being with you through the whole laboring process, I would agree with and back that up 100%, because I never felt like you were fighting the birthing process or the contractions. I always felt like you were embracing it and wanting to work with it. So,
well, and especially knowing I got the epidural and nothing changed.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't think that was the issue. Could there have been different positions for me to be in that could have helped him engage? Possibly. I feel like we tried just about
possibly,
everything.
but just you moved so much and we did so many different positional things. And so,
Who knows? I like this one. Based on your journey, what do you feel like we need to normalize as women in society in general? I think we've mentioned this, but I think, again, just reiterating, listen to your intuition. Like 100%. Educate yourself and don't feel bad to advocate.
Yes.
For yourself.
Advocate for yourself. Don't feel like you're inconveniencing anybody.
No.
Like, this is your experience.
Yes.
You get to lead it. Being able to be firm with people. And like Jen mentioned, being able to fire an OB or a nurse and ask for somebody else is absolutely okay.
Did you vomit during labor? I did not. They said, I'm really paranoid about this and no idea how to prevent it. Don't think about preventing it would be my thing. We got like 50 back, I feel
the
like.
hospital style barf bags.
Yeah, we got so many, whatever. They were just off Amazon, but we were fully prepared for just anything that might happen. If I needed to poop during labor, if I needed to vomit during labor, like, whatever was going to happen was going to happen. And trying to control it or push against it, I think shouldn't be the mentality. Like, just allow, because your body is going to process and go through whatever it needs to go through in order to continue the labor. So allow. I would encourage, I did get some birth meditations. I got meditations leading into labor. So like prior to labor, and then I got meditations during labor. And I think having those to listen to prior really helped to prep mentally as well, for just like letting go and the allowance of whatever happens is best for my body, is best for my baby, is best for the situation. That really helped. But I did not vomit. So we did not use a barf bag. I want to know if Dom cried.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would consider myself an emotional person, but for some reason I don't know if this is me just getting harder in my old age, but I feel like I've cried less in the last few years than I normally do. But man, the first time you hear your baby cry, it's hard. It's hard not to just like be overwhelmed with that emotion.
100%. Yeah. We both were in tears.
Yeah.
Any oral ties? Yes.
Yeah.
That is something that we're dealing with. So right from the gate, he latched. It was great. I didn't have any pain. Everything was going well. The lactation consultant in the hospital kind of gave me a little bit of positional support, and then that was it. I only saw it for like 2-3 minutes. I feel like it was super fast. And then it wasn't until I had hired a lactation consultant prior that was near my area, and she came over within a few days of us giving birth or leaving the hospital. And she really did a more thorough check on everything, really looked into his mouth and looked at the latch and all that kind of stuff, look at the nipples, what was happening. There was a little bit of a shallow latch. His lip wasn't flipping up.
Yeah.
And we have now been confirmed from 3 different providers that he does have a lip tie at the top and a posterior tongue tie. So
we're looking at getting those resolved and hoping that it really helps with some of the things he's been experiencing. And based on how things have progressed, I feel like it really would. And also just the value of having the lactation consultant, super huge, because she goes over so much. And again, as the partner, she goes over best bottle feeding strategies to start with, the bottles and the binkies that you should be looking for, and what the tips on those should ideally look like, and goes over stretches and things that you can do with the mouth and the tongue, just to work on them if you're not going to get any sort of revision, or even if you do get a revision, the things that you can continue to do afterwards. So super valuable having the consultant.
And she just, like most things in the hospital, it moves a little bit faster. Maybe the lactation consultant doesn't have that time available, right? She had an hour with us after when she first came. So it's just that time, I think, is very valuable. How did you choose his name?
I mean, mainly we just went through the online lists of the 1,000 most popular names, multiple of them. So I feel like we just went through a couple thousand names and kind of compared lists of the ones we really liked. And Dante was on both our lists, and I just really like the Italian sounding names. I mean, that's what my family has always had. And with the last name Fraboni, it's Dante Fraboni. And so that's what we went with. And then for the middle name, we initially had another plan, but just with Jen's dad passing, we wanted to honor her dad by...
Well, and we figured that out before he passed as well. We decided to make the switch and have his middle name be my dad's first name, because at that point we knew that my dad was terminal and we were going to lose him. So as a way to really
make Dante's pop a part of his life.
We decided to have his middle name.
Dante Roger.
It seems like your recovery was very fast and easy. What did you do to make it that way? Everything that everyone saw. If you watched my stories or watched my journey as I was going through all of pregnancy, I lifted, I trained, I did the full body low impact plan on Gen Health the entire time. I redid phases 1, phases 2. I wrote a program for phase 3 so that I could continue and do it. So I did the full body low impact plan, which includes strength, mobility, muscle activations, and core. I changed the core a little bit as I continued to progress. And I have that all saved in a highlight on the front of my page that says Preg mods. Those are from the full body low impact and all those modifications of what I took as I was going through the plan. But I really, really, really recommend training, exercising. It helped my body so much, understanding basic core pressures, intra-abdominal pressure, breathing. I did have diastasis recti. I noticed coning when I was first out of the hospital, which of course my body just gave birth. And we do get separation of the abs, but so quickly it's resolved and I feel strong, and amazing.
It's like anything in life. It's like, to make some sort of comparison, coming back from another injury is going to be a lot easier if you previously are very strong and have very good connection to all those muscles. Same thing with pregnancy, because you had such good strength in all of your extremities, because you had such good core coordination and contraction, and just that body awareness, that strength training, mobility training, training the core and pelvic floor brings you, all of those neural networks are much more prepared to come back from whatever type of trauma pregnancy and the delivery process brings.
And I will say I worked with a pelvic floor physical therapist as well. And so that gave me a lot more support and understanding and feedback within my body. What have you learned about yourself through your birth experience? That a woman's intuition is so dang powerful. And honoring that, listening to that, and leaning into that is the best thing that, I will always continue to do.
Yeah.
Were you happy with your L&D nurse? I think we talked about that. We were very happy with our nurses. I think that's all of them.
Huh.
And I will just end with saying, like, I'm just so grateful for you, like having the best support, you know, going into this, no matter what the plan was going to be, you know, knowing that we were going to go into a hospital at first and you were going to have to feel prepared to battle some potential nurses or OBs and really push back on our advocacy and what we wanted, especially if I wasn't going to be as connected and present in the moment. And then leaning into the midwife experience and then on our toes and switching things up and having you just support the entire way through, from everything I needed in pregnancy in those last 2 weeks where it was mentally the most challenging for me, and you were giving me full body massages and really working with me, like, and then watching you now step into fatherhood and how supportive you've been and how amazing it is to have your support. Like, I'm just so over the moon grateful. And maybe that's another reason why I don't have the postpartum depression, is because I feel the support from my partner, and I just couldn't be more grateful.
Thanks, babe. You did all the hard work. I absolutely can be the best supporting role possible. And yeah, and to the support roles out there, whether you're a partner or someone otherwise that is supporting someone going through the birthing process, like, it can be tough and there can be changes and it can be a big change in life. But again, just the communicating, the over communication, the asking what somebody may need or trying to anticipate needs. Like,
I mean, I needed to lean on you for everything when we got back from the hospital, like everything.
Yeah.
I remember that first night I needed to move my huge body pillow out of the way and I cried because I couldn't do it and I needed to ask for your support.
Yeah. So just being ready for what having a newborn brings and what your partner who just gave birth, what their body needs in the recovery process is huge. And I'm grateful to be home and to be able to do that to the best of my abilities. And we'll have to do another podcast once we're 5-6 months into this and just talk about the shocks and the joys and the trials and tribulations of being new parents, because that's just a whole nother thing once you get home and your boots on the ground. But yeah, we appreciate all you for listening. Long story, and got to do some Q&A, but hopefully that was valuable to just pick up some tidbits from Jen's experience, from our experience going through it all. Don't watch the epidural. Just step out of the room.
Or at least sit down.
Or maybe sit down.
At the very least.
But appreciate you all coming along this journey with us, and we can't wait to share more about Dante and about being a family together. Well, thanks for sticking with us and listening to that birth journey on how little Dante, little sleepy nugget here, came into our lives. If you enjoyed it or if you have other questions, please comment below. If you want to share anything about your own birth story, absolutely, please leave that down in the comments. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can get all the YouTube videos that we come out with in the future, and we'll see you on the next episode.